Good afternoon, everyone. It is Saturday, August 13th, 2022, and that means it's time for another of Western Liberty Network's weekly Zoom sessions. Today we're going to be dealing with the do's and don'ts of handling the media, and this is one of our more popular trainings, and it has a lot of good information, so we'll be getting to that shortly. I want to welcome Michelle and Donna to the session today. We're also recording this because it's interesting. More people watch the recordings than attend the live session most of the time, and so we'll try and provide good information for you there. A couple of things I need to say before we begin. First of all, that Western Liberty Network is a 501c3 organization. We do not endorse or oppose any candidate, even the candidates we train. We don't endorse or oppose any political party, legislation, or ballot measure, although we do support limited government principles. And so if there are statements made today that seem to be partisan in nature, they are the responsibility of those who make them and do not necessarily represent the views of Western Liberty Network. So I'm going to share the screen right now. And what you will see is a vision of our website. I want to introduce you to our website. westernlibertynetwork.org will redirect you to this site, and this will show you what we're doing. Every Saturday we have a training on Western Liberty Network, the one we're dealing with right now, and we have that advertised at the top. Other things we have going on, we have shown through following stories, and you will see that there are certain resources on the right-hand side. For example, hit that button that signs you on to the Zoom session. If you're on the Zoom session now, you've done that. And if you go down, you'll see like here's a recording of a training on organizing around local issues, a couple of slideshows about working with social media as a candidate and an activist, speeches from different speakers. There's just a lot of really good resources here you can look at. If you want training resources specifically, you can go to our training tab. If you go to the training tab, you will see types of training we provide, live trainings, online trainings, those sorts of things. And then you'll see a series of companion documents. There's a companion document associated with all of our training topics, and you can download one or all of them. If you see one that you like this one here, Lobbying Office Holders 1, click on that, and you will get a PDF document that shows you some information. This training document is meant to be provided with a live training session, but can be used on its own. If you go down to the bottom, you'll be able to download a PDF containing all of our training documents, so you won't have to download them one by one if you find several of them to be of value. If you scroll down a little further, you'll see recordings of the videos. We're recording one of these right now, and when we're finished with this session, the recording will be placed on top of this one here that I'm pointing at with my mouse. But we have, it's getting close to 2 years of videos on a variety of topics. I provide some of the trainings, but we have guest trainers provide others. And just scroll down and find the topic that you're interested in and watch the video. With the videos and the training documents, you can literally design your own personal training program to make you a more effective candidate for local office, citizen lobbyist, or a more valuable campaign volunteer. A couple of things coming up. On February 3rd and 4th, we will have our 13th annual conference, which will be at the Embassy Suites Hotel at the Portland Airport. We'll have a reception on Friday night the 3rd, and the conference will be on the 4th proper. You can mark off the dates now. Within the next couple of weeks, we'll have sign up ready to go and more details. So stay tuned as that develops. So with that, I'm going to stop sharing the screen and ask if anyone has any questions thus far before we begin the training session. Donna, Michelle, you good to go forward, or do you have any questions?
Good to go forward.
Okay. All right, very good. Okay, this particular training is called Dealing with the Media, Do's and Don'ts. And I'm going to send you through the chat window a training document that we have related to this. Okay, I've just sent it, so you should have it available. You can look at this later, or you can follow along as you wish. It's interesting. Dealing with the media is a touchy subject, particularly if you're a conservative or a limited government activist. because we tend to see the media as tilting heavily to the left. And so we sometimes think we go into an interview with a bias automatically against us. That sometimes is true. In fact, it's often true, but it's not always true. Sometimes they will be unfair, but there are things you can do to increase the chances that you will be treated fairly, or at least accurately, when you are working with the media. And here I'm talking about interviews with newspaper reporters, talk show hosts on radio stations, sometimes television interviews that are heavily edited, or podcasts, or those sorts of things. And so if you follow these guidelines, it will be very helpful to you. The first thing to remember when you're dealing with a reporter is just remember that most reporters are just trying to get through their day. We have this idea that many reporters are ideologically driven and they're pushing to the left, pushing to the left. And at the top, you know, if you go on to CNBC or CNN or some of those outlets, that can often appear to be the case. And at the top, you know, the well-paid television personalities that are playing toward a specific market, that's absolutely true. But most of the time, the people who are working at your local newspaper, even regional newspapers like the Oregonian or the Salem Statesman Journal, they tend to be liberal, but they're underpaid. They're stressed. They have multiple stories to do in a day. There are a lot of people that want those jobs. They're always at risk of being fired. And just remember that they're really just trying to get through their day. Yes, they may tend to the left, but there are exceptions. But while they may tend to go to the left, they are really motivated by two things. One, they want to go home. They want to finish their day and go home. And the second thing they want is not to get fired. It's very easy to get fired. I'll tell you a couple of stories about that in just a second. But remember that reporters don't want, you know, they go into the journalism school thinking that they're going to be the next Woodward and Bernstein. You know, they come out all starry-eyed, they work for these newspapers, and then they find out that it's just a grind. A lot of them are working on a screenplay, a lot of them end up going into marketing, a lot of them go into advertising, but while they're there and while they're grinding away in the newspapers, they basically just want to get home. They're given 4 or 5 stories, they're given a hard deadline. And if they don't get things done quickly, they're there till 11, 12, whatever it takes to get their story in, you know, before the deadline. And so if you can help them go home earlier, you are gold to them. That is what they want. Even if you are not of their ilk ideologically, if you can be the one that gets to them quickly, answers the phone call, or returns a phone call quickly, these kinds of things, you are gold to these reporters. And even if they are ideologically on the other side, you are the person that helps them finish their day, and that is gold to them. So make sure that you follow that. The other thing you need to remember is that they don't want to get fired. I'll tell you something personal about my life. I used to be married to a reporter, you know, my earlier marriage, and she worked for a number of good newspapers. She worked for the Sacramento Bee, the Oregonian, some other ones. She did writing for the Capital Press. And earlier in her career, when she was on a community newspaper in California, she was asked to cover a pumpkin festival. And the pumpkin festival didn't go very well. It was poorly advertised, poorly attended. It was raining, the kids were crying, and it just didn't go well. And she turned in a story to her editor that said, as it was, that accurately told the story. And the editor looked at the copy and came to her and said, "I'm sorry, if I print this, I have to fire you." She says, "Why?" He says, "Because our largest advertiser sponsored the pumpkin festival, and we can't have it be negative." So she had to rewrite it, and she rewrote it so that the pumpkin festival was a success, and found a couple of pictures of kids laughing during the day and that sort of thing. And you know, you can get fired for all sorts of reasons. And so it's important that you know who to talk to. If a reporter makes a mistake, and they often do make mistakes, it's seldom because they are acting nefariously and maliciously and ideologically. Usually it is because something was not communicated clearly. Usually if the reporter makes a mistake, it's because what's obvious to you, because you are steeped in an issue, is not obvious to them, and they heard it wrong or understood it wrong. And what's really important, and this goes in terms of not getting them fired, is if they make a mistake, do not call their editor. Do not call their editor and say, you've got a lousy reporter that did a horrible job. They got this wrong, they got that wrong, they got the other thing wrong. What that's going to do is that's going to put pressure on that reporter. And remember that if they don't get fired, they're going to hate you. They're not going to cover you. They're not going to want to talk to you. They're going to want to stay away from you. You're going to be radioactive to them. So the thing to do if they make a mistake is to call them up and say, yeah, I want to thank you very much for covering the story. Listen, I wanted to cover some things with you. I may not have been clear, but I wanted to say a couple of things that were counterfactual in your article, and I think it's maybe because I was not clear. You know, fall on your sword if necessary. If it happens 3-4 times over and over again, you know that the reporter maybe isn't being honest, but in most cases, the reporter just didn't understand, didn't get it, didn't do their research, and or something like that. So talk to the reporter. Most of the time, reporters will be happy to get it right. And if they make a correction or they get it right in the next article, they will not have had their assignment editor on their case. They will not have been in trouble, and that's great. So what you're doing is you're making yourself an important resource to that reporter. You be the limited government activist that they call first, because if you get back to them quickly, if you answer the phone call, if you return the phone call quickly, and you give them clear information, next time they have to do a story and they need a conservative or a limited government perspective, you're going to be the first person they call. And once you build that reputation with one reporter, it will spread to other reporters because they talk, even between newspapers and even between media types. They talk, and you will be the one that gets called. If you do that while trying to help them do their job, they will love you. And that's just very, very critical. The other thing is know who to talk to. Sometimes you'll see an article and the headline is misleading. Remember that the reporter almost never gets to write the headline. The editorial department writes the headline. And don't assume that the editorial page department is connected with the news department. That often is the case, but it's frequently not the case. Find out who the editor is of the paper, and find out who the assignment editor is who handles the politics. This is the person who will decide which reporter covers which story. And then find out which reporter that has your beat. If you're running for the state legislature, which reporter covers state legislative races? If you're running for city council, which reporter covers city council races? Education, sometimes a reporter is dedicated to covering education issues. Find out who the reporter is that is assigned to your beat. Find out who their assignment editor is that tells the reporter which stories to cover. And then find out who the editor is of the newspaper. You won't have to talk to the editor very often, but sometimes it's good to have that information. Make sure you've got their phone number handy, their fax number handy, and yes, newspapers still use faxes. And make sure you've got the email ready. So if you have a story idea for a reporter, what I would do is go to an assignment editor first. Find out who the assignment editor is and say, hey, Mr. or Ms. Assignment Editor, I've got a great story. I'm going to be doing this town hall meeting in the community room of the YMCA next Tuesday. And if they're interested, they may ask you for a press release, and they may cover it. You can also contact the reporter and let them know. Sometimes the reporter will talk to the assignment editor, reinforcing your initial phone call, increasing the chances that you're going to get covered. So it's really important to know who to talk to. You could end up talking to 2-3 people by the time you get something covered. And if they cover you spontaneously, you don't ask for coverage, but a reporter comes, you might still end up talking to a couple of different people. Number 3, make sure everything you send the media is typed and looks professional. This might seem to be something that's obvious, but I have seen candidates send handwritten press releases done in a Sharpie marker and send it into a fax. It was very rushed and hurried, but it did not look professional at all. It did not represent the reporter well. Make sure that you send it in a way that looks professional. You have some sort of a letterhead that you send out a press release on. We do have a training on how to write press releases. You can access that on the training tab of the westernlibertynetwork.org website. But make sure everything that you send them looks professional. Get good photographs of yourself or the candidate you're working for or the person in charge of the ballot measure campaign that you're working for. Make sure you have a good picture. You want to have this in digital format. You want to have it high resolution. You want to be able to send it to the reporter. And even if you don't have a story, even if you think you might have a story in the future, email the photograph to the assignment editor and the reporter and say, I'm going to be doing work in education. You may want to cover some of my work. If you do, here are some high resolution photos that you can use if you wish. Just volunteer that, make sure they have your photos on hand in stock. And it's also good to have some 3x5s ready to go. Not very many people use those anymore, but some do, particularly in smaller towns. They'll still take a photograph and scan it and put it into their newspaper. But it's good to have a good professional headshot. If you don't provide them with a good professional headshot, they'll take a picture themselves. And when they have a photographer come out in the middle of an interview and take a picture, the lighting is never optimal. It's, you don't know what's in the background. The pictures don't look as good. You don't know what they're going to use. So what you want to do is you want to do your best to define your image. You want to make sure that you have your own photographs, because if you provide them a photograph, it's easier for them. They have something ready to use, and it's better for you because you get to choose your image, what gets projected in the newspaper or on TV or wherever it is, radio station website or anything of that sort. Are there any questions so far? I've been yakking for a while. Want to see if folks have any questions on this? No? Okay. I'll continue. Number 6.
I do have one thought.
Yeah.
For the first time ever, I had written a press release and contacted as many online newspapers as possible, trying to find the editor name or the person name. What are the rules on press releases? If you give it to them, do they have to publish it? Do they have to publish it the day you give it? What kind of is having never done one, what are the rules on press releases?
Well, there are no rules on press releases. Press releases are when you are, let's say I want to send something to the Beaverton Valley Times. I'm hoping the Beaverton Valley Times will cover an event. Let's say I'm having a rally in front of the post office for tax day. Okay, I may send a press release to the Beaverton Valley Times saying that I'm doing this protest, but all a press release does is make them aware that something is happening. It's up to them whether or not to cover it. Most of the time, if you're doing something that is newsworthy, it will get covered. If you're just telling things that are not particularly newsworthy, will this generate, will this be something that the readers want to see? What may be newsworthy to you is not necessarily going to be newsworthy to them. Okay, you might be working on something that's very important. Let's say I'm doing a tax protest at the post office. That's important to me. Okay, I think that's really important. Why wouldn't people want to cover it? We all have to file our taxes. It's relevant to everyone. It's obvious. People should want to know what's going on at this rally. But newspapers look at it completely differently. Television stations and radio stations. They're thinking, who is going to want to read this article? What unique is being provided at this event that is newsworthy to my readership? What do they want to see? In television, they say if you want to get covered, you want kids and animals and balloons, things that provide good visuals. Even if it's not particularly newsworthy, it's something that people want to see. Newspapers, they want to publish things that people want to read. Radio stations, they want to publish things that people want to hear. So what are you providing of value to them? But there are no rules. They can cover a press release, they can ignore it. They can cover it a week later or a month later or the next day, or the same day. It's completely up to them. So what you're doing is you're providing them with a story idea. You're giving them a suggestion. You're jumping up and down and saying, hey, I'm doing this thing, cover me. That's what a press release does. Does that help you, Donna?
Yes, thank you.
You bet, you bet. Okay, another thing too is have a social media presence. Make sure that you've got something there for them to log on to. Maybe it's a Facebook account, a Facebook page, website. People still use those. Twitter, Instagram, whatever it is, make sure you have a social media presence. Make that a part of your press release. When you issue a press release, let them know what your website is, how to get to your Facebook page, how to get to your Instagram, whatever you've got, but make sure you have a social media presence. Sometimes if you just get a couple of minutes to talk to a reporter and you're not able to provide complete information, they will go on your social media page and do a little background research, and sometimes they'll be able to backfill something they didn't ask or forgot to ask, or something that you forgot to share. So make sure you've got a social media presence. Number 6, be accessible. I can't emphasize this enough. I've already sort of hit on this, but I'm going to hit on it again. Reporters are very time sensitive. TV more than anyone. Radio next. Newspapers next. Bloggers a little bit less so. But reporters are very time sensitive. So if you are wanting the media to cover a story and you put out a press release letting them know that you're doing something, be accessible. Have your cell phone with you. Give them your cell phone number. Answer the phone right away. Don't let it go to voicemail. If for some reason it does go to voicemail, check your voicemail frequently and call them back immediately, right away. If you are accessible, you will be an asset to them. If you are not accessible, you will go down on the list in the order of people that they call if they want to know something. So make sure that you are very, very accessible. And then finally, I've touched on this before, don't alienate reporters. I've heard people call up reporters and go, I saw that story you read. What a piece of trash. What school did you go to? What journalism school did you go to? If this happened in my day, you'd have been fired, blah, blah, blah. Is that reporter going to call that person again? No. And it's interesting that being right doesn't matter. They've got the power as long as they're employed. As long as they're employed, they've got the power. And you being right does not help when you are yelling at them and you alienate them. Okay, if you don't want them to be your enemy, don't alienate them. If they become their enemy, if they become your enemy, then you're going to be very unhappy of the coverage they give you if they ever cover you again. So it's really important not to alienate reporters. Help them, give them good information, help them do their job, help them go home, help them not get fired, and they will love you, even if they're ideologically on the other side of particular issues. Because most of them still have to cover, at least at a token basis, both sides. And so they're going to want to go to somebody, let that person be you. And so, I can't promise you that you're always going to have a good relationship with the media, but that will help a lot. Be patient with them. Take your time. Don't give them a fire hose of information. Give them information at a rate that they can clip it. They don't know shorthand anymore. They try to write things down in the notebook. If they're writing a lot down in the notebook, make sure you don't talk faster than they're able to write. Give them time to write down what they're going to do. If they don't seem to understand something, just be patient, back up, don't get short with them. I've seen that happen. Always be patient. Now, if you get caught with a question you don't know how to answer, do not BS your way through. You can always tell, and it always looks bad, and it destroys your credibility in the future. If somebody asks you a question and you don't know the answer, just be honest about it. Say, something, that's an interesting question. I haven't thought of that. I haven't thought about that before. I'll tell you what, rather than answer off the cuff, I'd like to think about it for a little while and call you back this afternoon or call you back tomorrow. Is that all right? There's nothing wrong with that. If you really don't know the answer to something you should have known the answer to, it will cost you in the short run. But in the long run, you need your credibility. You need your credibility with the newspaper. You need your credibility with the audience. If you try to BS your way through an answer and the reporter prints what you say, it is not the reporter's fault if you end up looking bad in the story because you don't know something you should have known. It looks much better to people if you're honest and say, you know, I hadn't thought about that. I'd like to think about it for a while and get back to you. You know, give me a couple of hours and I'll call you. Is that all right? Most of the time they'll say yes. And you can think about it, give them a more thoughtful answer, and you're going to enhance your credibility with that reporter. You're not going to be feeding people BS. The BS won't get, you know, published in the paper. They may say something like, you know, so-and-so got back to me with an answer later. They didn't initially know it. And that's not great, but it's not as bad as publishing something that's BS or trying to dazzle or trick your way out of a question you don't know the answer to. So, you know, be very clear about that. And then finally, again, don't make assumptions about the political persuasions of the news departments or individual reporters. There was once a reporter in the Dalles Chronicle, a fairly liberal paper, but this particular reporter was very conservative. And this is back when I was running for governor in 1998. I didn't expect him to be conservative, but he was, and it took me by surprise, and it taught me a lesson. Don't assume. Just do your best to give people good information. Most of the time, people will respond well to good information. And if you don't make assumptions, you may sometimes be pleasantly surprised at the tilt you get. It's not always going to happen, but it's often going to happen. And so those are the tips I have on how to deal with the media. It's not rocket science and it's not a long training, but these are particular tips that, you know, will not guarantee you that you'll always get covered or that you'll always have good coverage. But I will guarantee you that if you use these tips, you will get covered more often, and your coverage will be better when you are covered than if you don't use these tips. So are there any questions?
I have one question. I was being interviewed over the phone by a reporter, and as a lawyer, I guess I'm used to seeing the document before I sign off on something. So I just asked the reporter, you know, can I see the article when it's still in draft, just to make sure what I thought I said is what you heard and what you printed. And she was very nice and said, no, that's not how they operate, but that she would volunteer to send me the quotes that she was going to use, that she was going to attribute to me. And so I figured that was pretty good compromise. And it turns out she got one not as I said it. So I was able to then send back to her, hey, here's some actual language that I want to use for this quote. This is what I thought I said, and so forth. Anyway, so is that kind of normal that they don't let you see what it is first? They just publish it?
That's pretty abnormal, unless if you're in real trouble. Let's say that you're about to be indicted of a crime, and the reporter is doing a story on it. You know, normally or if you're in a lawsuit or something like that, those kind of things, it's pretty normal for a reporter to say, I'm doing this story and this is what I'm writing. Do you have anything you'd like to add or subtract? They will often do that. But unless it's something extreme like that, it's very rare. Usually they'll just write the story. You can ask them, you know, to get back with you on quotes, but they almost never will. The fact that you got a reporter to send the quotes to you is, you know, kind of miraculous, actually. It doesn't happen very often. So don't expect that. So it's important that you be clear. You be very clear. And if they write something that's not accurate, call them up and don't yell at them. Tell them, you know, something, you know, take the blame. I wasn't clear. I must not have been clear. This is what I meant to say. I want you to know this for the future reference. And they'll thank you and they'll appreciate how you handled it. And it will help to build a relationship with them. But under normal circumstances, don't expect that they're going to call you and, you know, sort of check with you to make sure that what they're going to write is okay. Does that help?
Okay. Yeah. Luckily she did send it and it worked out fine.
Good. Yeah, sometimes they do. Sometimes you get lucky. That's right. How about you, Michelle? Do you have any questions?
No.
Okay. Did you both get the file I sent?
No.
On the chat window?
No, there's like nothing in there.
Yeah, I got it and I downloaded it.
You got it down. I'm going to send it again. Okay, you'll see it in the chat window, Michelle.
Yeah, I literally see absolutely nothing in the chat window.
Okay. I'll show you how to get it if you don't have it. And it's funny, sometimes it works like it did for Donna, sometimes it doesn't, like it did for Michelle. I'm going to share the screen again and I'll show you how to get it. Oops. Here we go. Okay. What you can do is go to the westernlibertynetwork.org website, go to the training tab, and scroll down. And here it is, dealing with the media, do's and don'ts. So click on that, and you'll see the document. You can download it at your convenience.
Thank you.
Got that, Michelle?
Huh?
Okay, good. Excellent. Excellent. So, unless people have anything for the good of the order, we'll call it a day.
All right, thank you very much.
Okay, thank you very much. God bless you all, and hopefully we'll see you next week.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Bye.